Well, hello, and welcome to this awesome Ask Us Anything. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I am the host of the Stark Reflections podcast. And I first wanted to do is introduce the awesome authors of the Ask the Authors 2022. And to do that, I'm first going to introduce Kaye Lynne Booth. I'm going to spotlight Kaye, so I'm going to move you over here, spotlight you. And then after Kaye talks a little bit about this project, a bit of her background, we're going to go around the table so you can meet everyone in the room. And so let's just begin with a little spotlight on Kaye.
Hi, I'm Kaye Booth. I'm an author, a multi-genre author, and also the founder of Wordcrafter Press and Wordcrafter Quality Writing and Author Services. We did Ask the Authors 2022 came about. The original Ask the Authors was a series of blogs, a blog series on my blog, Writing to be Read. And we did that. I think we had like 17 different authors by the time I was done with that one. But we had to pull the blog down because Amazon wouldn't publish anything that was available for free online. So with Ask the Authors 2022, I gathered everybody up, asked the questions, put the book together, and then did the blog series, and that kind of was my workaround Amazon. But what it is we've got 11 different authors. They were all asked questions on multiple different subjects, from writing life, pre-writing rituals, craft questions, publishing questions, and also book marketing questions. And there's a section in the book for each. And then each author was also asked to give me an essay on the subject of their choice. And so each author is featured with their essay, and then you get to see their answers to all the different questions. And it just gives a plethora of writing wisdom for authors to draw off of. And hopefully some of it, surely they'll find something that's helpful.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kaye. What I'm going to do now is just do the roundtable. So I'm going to do it in ascending order. You see me in the top right corner, and then I'm going to move Mario up next. So Mario, get ready to share. Who is Mario, and what did you write for this particular book?
Okay, yes. My name is Mario Acevedo. I am the author of the Felix Gomez Detective Vampire series, starting with the Nymphos of Rocky Flats, and then moving on to X-rated Bloodsuckers and the Undead Kama Sutra. So that should kind of give you an idea of the tone of those books. I've also written a YA, kind of a spoof on science fiction. It's called The University of Doom. I've also worked as a ghostwriter. I've helped other people write their books, most recently Luther, Wyoming, which is a Western, and then some memoirs. I've also gotten maybe 24, almost 36 short stories published. Most recently with Shadow Atlas. And, over time, I've sort of migrated away from sort of satirical fantasy novels into more crime and horror stories. And that's really kind of what I'm kind of digging in now. With Ask the Authors, I want to thank Kaye for inviting me here, and also to Mark for hosting this. I know this is always kind of a labor of love. So, what I wanted to do was kind of impart some of what I've learned in writing and it's really hard for me to say any one little thing is going to push you over the edge to getting published and getting the kind of success that you want, because there are so many variables, and the publishing world is so dynamic that what worked yesterday won't work today. So you always have to keep working. I would say just believe in yourself and keep pushing forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mario. I'm just giving Roberta a bit of a heads up that I'm going to be throwing you into the spotlight now.
Alrighty.
Hi, my name is Roberta Eaton Cheadle. I am a author from Johannesburg in South Africa. I have been writing, well, I've been published since 2016, and I started with a series of children's books called the Sir Chocolate Book Series. I wrote them with my son. They are picture books, and that was where we started, and we were picked up by a small publishing house quite quickly, and that was how we got started. And then I moved on in start writing for adults. I started some short stories, and the genre is horror, paranormal, and history. So I do quite a lot of writing. And since then, I have written and published two historical paranormal novels. And I've been in I've got short stories in about 14 anthologies. I've also got 2 poetry books. And I've got now 11 children's books that some of which were co-authored with my son, and one with my mom, and a couple of my own. So that's sort of my journey, my writing journey. As far as advice to others, I think what I've done over the years, and I haven't been in the game as long as many of the people who are involved in this book have been, but I think you need a lot of determination. You have to understand that it was easy, and you have to keep working hard at it, particularly marketing. I've tried many different tools. I find my blog works well for me. It's my main social media, and I have a YouTube channel where I share things that are related, poetry and recipes and all sorts of things related to my writing. You have to be prepared to innovate and try new things, and you have to just keep going and writing as much as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm now going to throw Kevin up into the spotlight.
Hi, yes, Kenneth is my brother. I'm Kevin. Okay, just clarify. Yeah, I submitted my first short story to Analog Magazine in 1968, and in 2000 was an overnight success. I had about 33 years of rejections in there before I finally made a sale. So my advice is keep writing, keep submitting. And about me personally, most of the things I've written are media tie-in. I have 4 novels in different television or role-playing game universes. I've written half a dozen role players' world books, explains the world that they're in and what missions are. Edited a lot of those. And I've written for Star Trek. I got 1 sale to Doctor Who, still, that's sort of a holy grail. My original fiction, and of which I'm most proud, is a young adult science fiction series set in an alternate world. And that required a lot of world building. Anyway, and recently, just now, as a matter of fact, the project I was working on that I almost forgot to come here today. For the first time, I am ghosting a memoir of a person who's had an interesting life that actually ties in with my career when I wasn't writing, which was working in special education and then crisis intervention and support mental health services for about 30 some years. And it's a new world for me, putting myself in someone's shoes and saying things in their words, not how I would explain it. So it's a learning thing, and it's actually very interesting.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. I'm now gonna throw Bobby into the spotlight.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Bobby Nash. I write a bunch of different genres as well. I do a lot of crime fiction, a lot of thrillers. I like to kill people in my books. It's a lot of fun. I also do some work for other publishers. I've done some short stories, some novels. I've done a couple screenplays and some audio work. I've done some media tie-in. I do comics. Pretty much whatever interests me at the day, I guess. But that's what I do. I've been at it a little while. I sold my first comic in 1992. I sold my first novel in 2004, and it came out in 2005. And it's been pretty steady, work since 2004, which has been nice. So yeah, in terms of I guess advice and all this, one of the things that I wish I had learned earlier was two things: that this is a business, that you're technically a small business owner. So as much fun as writing is, there's all this other stuff that goes with it that I didn't know at the time when I started. So I probably would have taken more business classes to learn some of these things. And then the other thing is to determine what success means for you. That way you can set your trajectory of what you want to do with your writing based on where you want to go, not what you just assume everybody's doing. Because I'm sure if in talking to all the panelists here, you'll find out we probably all have taken different paths to do certain things, or you just have to decide what works best for you. And we talk about that quite a bit in the book as well. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it here.
Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate that. And Jagi, I'm going to bring you into the spotlight, and you can let me know if I pronounced your name properly, first of all.
It's actually Jagi, but you can't figure it out by looking.
Jagi, thank you. Sorry, I got that now.
It's like Jackie with a J. It comes from magic. It's a little easier to say if you realize that. But before I talk about myself, Bobby made a comment about the accounting side of things. And the book we're all in is currently in a story bundle. And one of the other books in that story bundle is on the accounting for writing. And I was really excited about that. I was like, I want to read that one. So you get them both right now. And another book that's in that same bundle is my writing book, which so I say very briefly about my fiction, and then I'll say how I got into the writing book business. I write fantasy, mainly either YA or adult fantasy. I had a series based on kind of a sequel to Shakespeare's Tempest that came out originally from Tor and is now with Wordfire. And I have a YA series that's been described as fringe or supernatural meets Narnia at Hogwarts. And when I was learning to write, I used to write down writing tips for myself. If I learned something and I didn't want to forget it, I would write the writing tip on the sheet I had. And every now and then I'd show it to another writer. And to my surprise, they were like, that was really helpful. So I think it was 2008 or 2009, I started a blog called Wright's Writing Corner. My husband's also an author and his last name's Wright. Sounded better than Lamplighter's Writing Corner. And I had myself and him and a bunch of other writers, but we had quite a few people come and do guest blogs on writing. So what I did was I took each of those writing tips and I wrote an essay about it. I then started editing. And after a couple of years of editing, I noticed that I was giving the same advice over and over again to nearly everybody. And I took some of, like, when I would write out an analogy for one of my writers, I would then kind of put it aside and turn it into an article, and I could share it with other writers. And eventually I had enough for a book. I had either and then I started teaching. I did a number of classes using as the lessons the essays from the blog that had been writing tips and the information I got as a my light is going out. The information that I got as editing. So I came up with a book and we did a crowdfunder for it and made a series of videos. So all of the essays in the book have videos that haven't ever been sold yet. My agent is still shopping it. But one of the essays in that book had not appeared anywhere else. It was, I think it's on Tropes, if I remember which one it was. Anyway, it was not part of the original blog, and that's the one that I gave to Kaye for Ask the Author, because I thought it'd be nice for her to have something that hadn't been sitting out on the internet for years and years. I think that's about it.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do, rather than force people to be in the spotlight, I figure, and often writers are a little bit more comfortable being on the panel together without going, "Whoa, look at me." So what I'm going to do is just, and rather than also pick on people one by one, I thought for the rest of this we'll stay on a screen like this, and just do a little bit of a roundtable discussion, because I wanted to just get the people who are watching or listening to this later on in the podcast feed, just to get a feel for the authors who are a part of this collection. And as mentioned previously, I believe it is available if you go to storybundle.com. There's only 2 or 3 story bundles alive at a time, so you'll see the writing one that's tied in with I think it's for the entire month of October and November. As I believe it's one of the 2-month story bundles, and obviously some great books for writers, including Ask the Authors 2020. So the next question I was going to ask is, first of all, a show of hands, is how many of us have been traditionally published or work with traditional publishers, if you put up your hand. And so thank you. So the question, and I'll start off, I'll put myself in the hot seat first, is the question, and that gives you guys a chance to think about this, because I'm putting you all in the hot seat, is what is one recommendation that you would have for when you're pitching your book, either to an agent or to an editor? What are some of the things that you found useful in that journey? Now, for myself, I want to start off with the idea that before I pitch to, and I've never, I have pitched to agents, but my successful publishing was pitching directly to an editor at a publishing house. So what I've always done for the pitch is I've always created a Venn diagram chart for myself and said, okay, this is where the book fits in the market. And I look at the demographics of who the book is for. And I'll use an example. The first book I published with Dundurn, Canada's largest independent publishing house. Dundurn Press, I did Haunted Hamilton. Hamilton, Ontario was the city I lived in at the time. And the first little circle of the Venn diagram was people who love ghost stories, because it was ghost stories about Hamilton, Ontario. Okay, great. People love ghost stories. Then there was people who love Canadian history, specifically local history, because you can't tell a good ghost story without digging into the history, because that makes the ghosts a little bit more interesting. And then the third demographic was people who are proud of their city. They just want anything and everything to do with Hamilton. And so those are 3 of the demographics. I could have gone with more, but what I did is to come up with my pitch letter, I first visualized this Venn diagram and said, okay, the ideal readers are the people who cross all 3 of these cross sections. So that's the ideal reader that this book will sell to. It doesn't mean that people who like ghost stories aren't going to just buy it, even if they're not from Hamilton or whatever, but that just is what you would focus on. And then similarly, what I do is I have my Venn diagram so I can visualize it, because I'm a visual person. Then I would also say, and here are the books that these readers may have read before. And they may be ghost story books, Canadian ghost stories. They may be history books. They may be books about Hamilton. And so that helped me, and eventually helped the publicists who ended up, shepherding this project when it came to completion, in terms of figuring out who the demographics are. So that's a tip that I have. Anyone would just want to jump in with their tip?
That's really great. I want to keep that in mind. Mine it's very simple, but many years ago, when I first got out of college, I went to a convention and I ran into a publisher who's still my editor and agent today. And like a month later, I was working for him as an intern. He knew nothing about me except that I'd introduced myself at a convention. On my first day, I rejected books. So the first thing is, you might be getting a rejection letter from a college intern, so it's important not to take it, too much to heart. In my case, the publisher was publishing kind of a high quality science fiction of a certain type. So the book was Blue Jay Books, which was a New York publisher at the time. And so, it was kind of limited. It was easy to see what wouldn't fit. And the other thing was, as the person doing the reading of the slush pile, I really appreciated when the cover letters were simple and straight to the point. I think having a simple, straightforward cover letter, you make sure you put your name and address and contact information, if you've had other writing, and just say what you want to say very straightforwardly. It made it a lot easier. Some people were very complicated, or they're a little too fancy. It made it harder to try to see where it was going. And the only other story I'll tell from that job is one day a box arrived. In the box was a carved wooden box, and in the carved wooden box was a manuscript. No one in the office would even look at it. They said nothing that arrives in that way is ever worth reading. Nothing that comes out of the ordinary where somebody's doing something exotic to get attention. And the person didn't even include a return address. I don't know how they could have bought it if they wanted to. But I was a college student, so I opened it up, and they were right. It wasn't very good. But I just thought that was a kind of a sum up of when you're going to try, it's a profession. Treat it like a profession. Just do the best you can in a simple, straightforward manner.
I like that. Great example. Thank you. Who else wants to share sort of a tip on? Okay.
I've noticed in talking with publishers, especially in the last 10 years, that they want to know your marketing plan or your promotion plan, or if you even have one, because the market now, a lot of that falls on the writer. The publishers don't do as much of that as they did back before. And so quite often, there have been several times where having that plan has given me a little extra with the publisher, because they know there's going to be, I'm going to be working on helping sell these books as well. And I've gotten publishers that have actually, asked me to pitch. And I asked one of them one time, I was like, what, not that I'm not appreciative, but what did I do that, made you just say, here, pitch me something? And it was because we know you promote the books. And that's a big thing for us, is someone that's going to, get out there and talk the books up and do various things. So coming up with plans, like you mentioned with the Venn diagram, there's also ways of where are good places for me, where I'm liable to go to promote the book. You might do, especially around, using your example, you may be like doing in October, we're going to set up at some haunted houses that are in that area, or, try to do stuff like that. So, if you're writing a book where your main characters are pilots, set up at some aviation events or whatnot. So they know that you're going to reach out to those places, and that helps a lot, because they know you're thinking beyond the publication of the book.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments on that?
Yeah, I will comment on it. I really like your idea of the Venn diagram. I love making that Venn diagrams. I think it was in middle school, and then now here's a great use for them. Something else that is, it is a business. So that query letters, for example, just think of think of it as a business letter that you're doing. You really want to get your client excited about it, but and you don't want to undersell what you're doing, but at the same time, you don't want to oversell it. So they look at the manuscript and then say, "Wow, this is really not what I was led to believe." And then there's a certain, writing query letters and cover letters is its own art to do. So I invite new authors or new writers that want to get published, is to really think about what they need to do. And I think that I'm very much a mid-list author, and the whole marketing thing, I know a lot of authors or writers, when they get into it, they expect someone else to do it for them. So you're going to have to learn what works and to be savvy about it, and having some kind of a strategy, and constantly finesse it, because, like I said earlier in my comments, what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow, especially if everybody else starts doing it. Okay, and then all of a sudden it gets old hat. And so to push forward, I like the story that Jagi did gave us about the manuscript arriving in that box, something. And I used to hear that from another literary agent. This is in the days when they used to get the paper manuscripts, where stuff would arrive like in a pizza box, right, with some kind of fanciful thing on it, trying to get their attention. And they look at that, they just see it for what it is a gimmick. And that if somebody's not willing to do the hard work of getting attention, the right kind of attention for their manuscript.
Thank you. So the next area I want to talk about is, so this project, Ask the Authors, right? There's a bunch of us, 11 of us, I think, in total, contributed, sort of working collaboratively, sort of getting to know one another, sort of getting to, you can obviously depend on a whole bunch of different people to share and talk about it in different spaces, because we all reach different audiences. But I want to just go back to writing and publishing in general, and sort of thinking about this project, but potentially others, is how important, because writers are supposed to be solitaire. I'm alone in front of a typewriter, and I write my manuscript, and some genius who's smart enough to publish it publishes it. But how important is networking, either in traditional publishing or in indie publishing? And anyone who wants to jump in on this, go ahead.
Well, everything is networking, particularly now, because it's actually so easy to do. Everything is done on the internet. We were talking earlier about when we used to send in paper manuscripts. And I mean, when I get one back with an editor's note on it that actually had something to do with what I wrote, used to be amazing. Now it's all email, which is much more efficient, but less tactile or visceral and exciting. But almost it's a village, because if you're in this industry, particularly media tie-in, but in almost everything I've ever been involved in, people know people, and you start talking to each other. I got friends of friends of friends on Facebook who are writers, and we will sometimes message back and forth. I get a question out of the blue from somebody. And I think that, I don't want to say it's who you know, but it's making the effort to know people gives you a feel for the industry and an idea of where what you are passionate about is going to fit in. I'm gesturing a lot because I used to teach, where what you are passionate about will fit in with the market. And it's a good, what used to take weeks, months waiting for a envelope to come back is now almost instantaneous. And it's probably one of the few things about this century that I actually enjoy is the amount of communication I have with people. I spend much less time staring at my Olivetti. Well, now, of course, I've got a computer, but much less time staring at my computer all alone.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're right. We've built this community of creative people, and it's not only is it good for the networking and stuff, having other writers can talk me off a ledge, when I screw something up, or so there's that bit of community. There's also a bit of propping each other up. Hey, my buddy's got a new book out, you're telling your friends, and there's a lot of that, just part of a community. But it is great too for research. Like earlier today, I'm working on a story that's set in the 70s in New York, and I was like, wait, what kind of radios did the police use? Oh, I have a friend who's a New York City cop. Typed him off a message. Within 20 minutes, I had my answer with photos. And so it is wonderful. You can talk to people, especially like people in other countries. So this world has gotten a lot smaller in that regard. And sorry, I do that too, Kevin. I talk with my hands a lot.
Yeah.
So,
I saw that.
I was never a teacher, but it's just, yeah. But I think that there's a lot that networking is wonderful. But networking can lead to work, because people get to know you. But that's not always the end result of networking. I have made a lot of great personal friendships from meeting other people, either through like what we're doing here or doing conventions or book signings and things like that. So there's a lot of community building that I think comes out of all the networking that's really nice.
I was just thinking about the work side of it yesterday because I was sending out a newsletter about 2 new anthologies that just came out, one of which I edited, and the other is called Shoot the Devil, so we're promoting it for Halloween. And I realized I knew everybody in it, and at least 2 of the authors were there because I had recommended them. Actually, I think 4 of the authors, because I'd recommended them. And I looked at the second anthology, and one of the authors was in that one too. And I realized that, all of the anthologies he'd been in recently were because we happened to know each other. And I was thinking about, and in the same day, a friend wrote me and said, hey, you sent me this story by another author that I'm friends with. Here's an anthology that story could go in. And so I began to realize that there's a real value to us knowing each other, because often with anthologies, they're not, even if you're trying to promote them to collect stories publicly, it's hard to know where. So you end up, it's a group you're in, or a particular, Twitter or Facebook thread or something. So it can be really valuable just to know other authors, because in the case of Shoot the Devil, what happened was the after the first stories came in, the editor said, hey, we're short on the word count. Some of the stories were shorter than we thought. Does anybody know other authors? And that's why I was able to, recommend a few friends. But, if you know other authors, you're in a position to say, oh, yeah, we really need a story about, sardonic vampires, or, whatever it is. And I have a friend who does that. And then, you can let them know about the opportunity. And I always really love the opportunity to help other authors, when I can get another author into an anthology or something, that just makes my day, because it just, you want to help your friends in general, and here's a chance to help the ones who are also writers. So I look at it as a really lovely opportunity.
Yeah. And this is a very small industry for as many people that are involved in it. It is a very small industry, and that works. That can work to your advantage.
It can work again.
It can work against you. If you're a person that's difficult to deal with, that gets around as well. Just as, oh no, this person always meets their deadlines. They're a dream to work with. That gets around too. And a lot of times, editors are more willing to take a chance on someone who is easy to work with.
And I'll just chime in and say that this is what I love about the author community, is everybody is really pretty good-hearted. I mean, I guess I've run across a few authors that were like, nah, I don't have time for you. But most authors, if I go to them, and I have cold called authors. I started out as the Southern Colorado Literature Examiner, and I didn't know anybody, but I researched and found the authors I was looking for, and I reached out to them, and most of them were more than gracious about helping me out, letting me interview them, that type of thing. And most of them are pretty willing to collaborate, and I love collaborations, because then you're extending your reach by the number of authors that you're working with, and it's great. It's wonderful. And this past year, besides Ask the Authors 2022, I put out a poetry anthology. I put out 3 short fiction anthologies, which we just finished the release on the 3rd of those. And I mean, it's just wonderful. The number of authors I'm working with is incredible, but everybody is very willing and generous as far as, will you be on a podcast? Will you be in a blog tour? Will you be, just in helping with the promotion? Everybody was great. And I've really, really enjoyed it.
One of the things that I discovered building on what you just said, especially in the beginning of this century when I was still finding my feet and actually started publishing and things, almost every writer I encountered was willing to pay it forward. I had a need, I didn't know exactly what to do, and they stepped up. I didn't have anybody tell me, you should figure that out on your own. I got, because I'm the kind of guy, I'm going to ask questions. And I got answers, and I got people who point me in what direction to go find the answers. And it's the community is very supportive. I think there's a whole lot of Sancho Panzas out there willing to help you on your journey, and I really enjoy that.
I'm gonna pick on Roberta right now because I believe the rest of us are all in North America. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to ask Roberta about how has technology played a role in being part of the community? Because obviously you're in a time zone many, many, many hours ahead of us, and obviously in a different continent. And can you still network with technology?
So I think for an Southern African author, technology is really the way you can network. The reading community in Southern Africa is very small. I think in South Africa, there's only, I read it, they did a survey and they say there's only 40,000 people who buy new books, generally speaking. So it's very low. So there isn't really much of a market here for those reasons. And so all my marketing is done online. From a community point of view, as I said, I always did write. I'm actually a chartered accountant. I work for one of the big four auditing firms. So I have that business background that you were mentioning. And I actually started, I wrote a series of publications on investing in Africa. The competitiveness on fourth industrial revolution and a very technical type of public. And that was actually when I learned all sorts of things about publishing and design. And I'd always written as a young girl. I'd never, ever even thought about writing and being published. And that taught me a lot about marketing, because obviously in a big firm, that is all done for, it's all thought leadership. It's all pushed out into the market. They do huge publicity campaigns. I was on television a couple of times, on the radio, and learned very much from all of that. And that's how in Africa it's very much done online and pushed out into other markets. At the time, obviously, a lot of the UK, the US were all looking at investing into Africa. And I've just taken all of that and used it when I first started publishing in 2016. I mean, at that point, I didn't even have a Facebook account. I didn't know about Twitter. I learned all of that. I didn't know about blogging. I found out about blogging. I think I was published in August, and I learned about blogging in October. And I have found through that community, I've met a lot of people. And it was through the encouragement, and Kaye is one of the people I met early, 2018, through another friend, author friend, who actually helped me make that jump into writing for adults. So it's certainly been invaluable to me. I wouldn't have made that jump. I wouldn't have even thought of trying to write for adults. And I've had colleagues and friends help me, because now I want to do some publishing directly myself and not through an agent. So I've had a colleague who's helped me learn how to do, put an iPod book together. I do a lot of illustrating as well. For my children's books, I do my own illustrations. So I've joined societies. Funny enough, much easier to market the art. It's a lot easier to market my artwork than my writing. So that's sort of my contribution on the electronic marketing. It's the only way for me, and it is reasonably successful.
Thank you. I was going to add this comment from Patty, who says it's important to engage with both writers and readers, which sort of leads to the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is how does an author engage with readers?
Right.
Right. Okay, that's the first one, yes, because you have to have a book, right, for that to engage with.
That helps. Yeah.
I would, my experience going to different conventions, particularly the last few years, well, pre-pandemic, and then now that things have loosened up, are the different kind of, because I write fantasy and science fiction related work, like the different kind of Comic Cons and some that are related to Comic Cons. Those have a lot of attendance from readers. We sell a lot of books at those, and that's probably been my best opportunity to meet readers and to sell books. And I'm really surprised at the enthusiasm we get at those conventions. I think that to me has been the one single venue that's been the most productive and the most effective. But granted, you got to go to different towns and cities, and there's all the logistics involved in that. But I do notice that when I go there, not only do I sell a lot of books, but then my royalties increase on books that I don't even have that I wasn't even selling. My backlist increases. The sales on the backlist increases. So I can definitely say that is a very productive way of reaching out to readers and making yourself accessible.
Yeah, I do a lot of conventions also, and I see the same thing that you do, Mario, because even if someone comes to my table, even if they don't buy anything, they leave with a card. It's got my website, my social media, all of that on it, and I see the same thing because it's really easy to run out of money at a convention quick. And people, next week when you get their next paycheck, they go, "Oh yeah, this guy had books," and they'll go to Amazon or wherever and buy some books. But I do second the conventions. I do a lot of them of different types and sizes. I was just at one over the weekend. It was a smaller show. It was just a 2-day show, but was really nice. It was very productive. A lot of attendees. But there's a lot you can do at a convention to kind of connect with readers. That's not just standing behind a table selling books. They'll invite you in to do panels. Very similar to what we're doing here, but just in front of, in a room with a live audience on different topics. And they don't always have to be on writing. I've been on panels where we're talking about certain types of movies or TV show, but you still get the chance to introduce yourself at the beginning of the panel and hold up a book and go, "I write this." So it's a great way to introduce yourself to people that may possibly have never heard of your work before. And there are certain audiences, in different types of cons. I do the big Comic Cons. I do smaller one-day shows, which are really more just people going to buy stuff. But there's all kind of different genres of them. Libraries are doing local author things all the time. Before the pandemic here I guess they still do it now, but it slowed a bit. Where I live in Georgia. And in the South, there's a thing where bars and restaurants have like evening book events where they will invite 5 or 6 authors to come in on a slow night at the bar, like on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And we do readings and sell books in the back room. And what they're hoping is we'll bring people in who will, buy drinks and food, and then hopefully their existing customers will buy books. And so there's a lot of different venues and types of events like that all do pretty well. But I second the convention thing. There's a lot of people that go to conventions. They generally like to read, and they're not just reading that. They're not just reading science fiction. I read a lot of crime fiction. Some of the best crime fiction sales I ever did was at a Doctor Who convention.
Yeah,
when I was a young person, my idea, I wanted to be famous, and my idea of being famous was being allowed to talk on panels at conventions. And of course, I ended up being able to do that, way before I really was established as a writer, just because, I could get one sale, and then back then they were looking for people,
Mm-hmm.
I love doing conventions. I love going out and talking about these topics and talking to people. But we just, right now, we kind of can't for various reasons, partially trying to get sons through college. As I said, good conventions take some money. So hopefully we'll do them again. But in the meantime, I've been trying to use Facebook and Twitter to interact with people. And I don't know how well it goes for selling books, but it's really delightful when you talk to someone who likes your books, or occasionally someone will kind of mention you when they're praising something you've written, and that's really great. Hey, look, I have a mention here, and 3 people are saying how much they like the story or something, and that's always really wonderful. I once got a fan letter from a 15-year-old, and I wrote her back, and we became the best of friends, our whole family. We introduced her to her husband. She has kids now. And, that was a really wonderful experience. She's a published writer herself now, too.
And I tell you, one of the coolest experiences in my life at a convention is when someone took the effort to pack books, travel with the books to get you to sign them.
That's it.
That took effort. And that, you kind of go, wow, So that at that same Doctor Who convention, some people I know who lived over in England flew over to Atlanta and brought a box of books to sign. That's effort.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I need to get back into conventions. Before, when I was writing for Star Trek, they paid my way to go to shore leave. And when I was writing for a game company, they paid my way to go to Gen Con. And then I started editing for them, and no one wants to meet an editor, so they stopped taking me to conventions. But although my one and only time that somebody was amazed to meet me was one of those air conditioner guys at the big box hardware store you're in. And he wanted to get my contact information. He's writing it down. He suddenly stopped and he said my name wrong, Killiany, but he said Killiany because that's what most people say. And he said, wait, you edited Shadowrun 5, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did. I edited the Core Royal book. And that was the only person in public who's ever known who I was. And I wanted to adopt him. But anyway, so yeah, they do know editors. But, and one thing, do not try to sign a book for someone who doesn't believe you're who you say you are. Learn that the hard way.
I haven't had that one. I went into a bank once. I got a royalty check, like a paper check. And I walked into the bank and I handed it to her to deposit it. And she looked at the name and she goes, Bobby, are you related to the writer? So that was as close as I got. Yeah.
That's where I would usually say, it's such a small royalty check. That's how you can tell I'm a writer.
Yeah.
My husband once got a job
with 2 on the other side of the decimal.
The lady interviewing him for the job was a fan. They'd read his books. We thought that was really cool.
I have to say, I love conferences and conventions. I really do. But again, they cost money, and you don't always have the money to do that. But I do a lot of my stuff online. And like when COVID hit, and some of you were on my panels and presenters because I just decided, well, if nobody can go to a in-person writing event, then maybe we should just have a virtual one. And so I created one, and I've done a couple of those. And also, I connect with readers a lot through my blog. We do blog tours, and I do a lot of book reviews. I used to do a lot of interviews. I haven't lately because I've kind of been playing with the idea of doing a podcast, and I'm kind of saving that for that maybe. But you know, like with the blog tours, we get people that come in and visit each stop and read the posts that are there and make comments on them, and we do giveaways, and it seems to generate quite a bit of engagement with potential readers. So I needed to throw that in there.
Yeah, I think one of the positives, if you can find a positive about the pandemic, was the rise of the virtual panels, especially in those years where there were no conventions doing them. You know, I know like Dragon Con's a big one here in Atlanta, and we did virtual Dragon Con where we did it just like this through StreamYard and whatnot, do panels like this where people could at least have a small taste of the conventions they were not allowed to do. And I think that helped a lot of people too when we were all trapped at home, you know, to still feel like you're part of that community. Because imagine had that pandemic happened in 1976. You know, we would have been, you know, I mean, you couldn't even just call everybody because of long distance charges. So, you know, the fact that we were able to do that has opened up a lot of worlds, I think. And even though conventions are started, I know a lot of them are still doing
Dragon Con
panels.
did a couple of virtual ones this year. I couldn't make it. I had to be somewhere else. They let me be on 2 virtual panels. I thought that was really cool.
And some of the tracks still do weekly or by every other week. They're still doing them all year long now. So it's like there's, you know, and there's a couple of groups that have made like businesses out of it. You know, Continual does stuff weekly. Go Indie Now, same way. They're doing stuff weekly using that model. So
that's cool.
So we are getting close to the end. We've got just a little over 5 minutes left. So just sort of for the very last things as we round out this hour is, what's something that you wish you had known when you first got into this business of writing?
Okay, I'll start. Just believe in yourself and not let yourself you know, get dragged down. Is to keep pushing forward, because you don't know when something good is going to happen. I know when I got dropped by my publisher, I got pretty down on myself, and it was actually fans who got me back on the horse, because I was getting emails they were asking me what's going on, and so consequently, the only person I hurt by not writing was myself. Okay. And then I ended up getting picked up by regional or mid-level presses and getting back in the game. So that's my advice is to really believe in yourself and to keep going. I've got friends of mine that are New York Times bestselling authors, and they have to shop their manuscripts around because the business is so darn fickle. You'd think they'd be solid bets. But, you know, it's all based on the whims of the industry and the editors that out there. So you just have to keep pushing forward and believing in yourself.
I think the 2 things one is how much it's changed. You know, I'd kind of psyched the whole thing out because I worked for a publisher and stuff, and then nothing I learned is of much use anymore. But the real thing that I often try to say to people, because you don't hear it much, is be wary of outlines. There are people who can write outlines and then write a book. And if you're that person, go for it. Obviously, organization is a good thing. But I've seen so many authors start out, or I should say writers who wish they were authors. And they write an outline, and the moment their outline's done, they never write another word. And they might have 5 chapters of really good stuff they wrote before. This happened to me back in 1992. And a couple of years later, a friend 3 different friends said, hey, I really liked that book we were working on. What'd you do with it? And I tore up the outline and started over with a kind of being free to let the muse, lead me. And that's the book that eventually was published by Tor. And so what I realized is some people, your imagination needs the openness to work. So if you start writing and you write an outline and you stop, tear up your outline. As I say, if you can do it with the outline, definitely. I don't have anything against outlines, but if you can't, tear it up and start fresh and let your imagination get free again. Change the scenes around, try going a different direction, because it's just a shame when you have 5 chapters that are great and then the person never finishes the story. So that's what I learned along the way that I don't hear people say that often. I like to share.
I have 2 things. Number one ties right in with what you were saying. There's no one way. You read the right way to how to publish your blockbuster novel or whatever, and then you try to do that, and it doesn't work for you because your brain is different. All right? So don't struggle to do something a way you think is the right way. Do it your way, and that will involve a lot of experimentation. The thing I wish I had known was move on. If I had a story, I sent it off, it got rejected. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with this story? I'd start rewriting the story I'd already written. That's like a musician not moving on until they get each exercise perfect. You practice, you practice, you practice. And once you have finished a story, no matter what you do, going back to rewrite it, unless you have an epiphany or you've matured greatly or whatever, you're just going to beat it to death. If you've done that, move on, take what you learned there, put it in your next story and keep going. I spent so much time recycling stories. It got rejected by Analog, so I rewrite it and then send it to fantasy and science fiction. Why? That was such a waste of time. And that is the thing that I would tell any beginning writer. It's 99% practice.
Okay,
Yeah.
so first I'd like to say that Jagi, rigid outlining, because outlines can be changed, and that's kind of how I use it. I'll make a basic outline and I'll start writing the story, and if everything's going okay, then I'll just stick with the outline. But if sometimes my characters do things that I didn't know they were going to do, and it changes everything, and I go back and change my outline to match. But no, and the thing that I think that I would wish that I had known would be the business side, more about the business side of the publishing industry and of writing, because I walked into it. I went and got an MFA in creative writing and walked away from that and said, okay, now I know how to write, but what do I do with it? So, which is why I went back and got the MA in publishing and am now my own publisher. But yeah, and today, if you get a rejection, I just wrote a story and submitted it for a specific call, and it got rejected. But in the time between the time that I submitted it and the time that they rejected me, I had already figured out what I was going to do for that story, with that story, if I got rejected. So even though they didn't like it and it wasn't perfect for them, I know what I'm doing with it, and I'm going to put it in a different anthology that I'm publishing. So I can't reject myself. It works out good.
Yeah, I second the business. I wish I had known more about the business side of it, because when I started, self-publishing wasn't really the option it is today. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, if you self-published, that just meant you weren't good enough to be published by a real publisher. That was the general wisdom of the time. So I put my efforts into thinking, I'll sell it to a publisher. They'll handle all this stuff. And then by the time I finally found a publisher, they weren't handling all that stuff anymore. So I had to learn a lot of this stuff on the fly. Learned it from watching other writers, talking to other writers. I learned a lot by screwing stuff up.
Best method.
Excuse me. But yeah, and so I wish I had known up front that being a writer is technically being a small business owner. That would have saved me a headache or two. Another thing I learned, it took me a while to learn this one, was the power of the word no. It's hard, especially once you get to a certain, you've been doing it a little while and you've made inroads. It's hard to turn down work. It's hard to say, no, I can't really do that anthology, or no, I can't, I don't have time. It's hard to do. And I got sidetracked away from my goal I was aiming for because I said yes to everything that was like, would you like to do this? Would you like to do that? And while I don't regret doing any of those things, they did take me away from the goal. So it took me a while to kind of course correct and get back to where I was aiming for. So the power of that word no is very important. And it took me a while to learn that. But yeah.
Shall I round it out for you, Mark? Last few
Please,
words.
Roberta. Yeah.
So I will just end off by saying I think that I'm probably the person here who has the least of my background wasn't at all writing, so it was totally finance and accounting. So when I started with writing, I didn't really have any expectations. I didn't have any particular goals because I didn't know anything about writing, so I didn't know what to aspire for. So I think in some ways that's worked really well for me because I've never had any disappointment in anything I've done, because everything I've done that's turned out well is unexpected and a great surprise. So, for example, when I submitted a short story, I mentioned a blogger who used to run short story competitions, and that's where I met Kaye. I submitted a story and it got a placing, a right honorable mention, and it was just so surprising because I'd never expected that. And then one of my stories was in Kaye's recent anthology, and it won the best story, and again just completely thrilling because I didn't have any expectations. So I guess for some people who maybe are wanting to write and haven't come out of this very strong writerly background, my advice would be, there's still a place for people. You don't necessarily have to have that very strong writerly background, and perhaps people who do have it, to keep your goals fairly loose, because I feel in life sometimes you get so focused on goals that you almost miss opportunities because you don't see them, because they aren't aligned perhaps with the specific goal you've got in mind. So in my situation, I didn't have specific goals, just sort of a wide, I want to write. So every opportunity that came, I took, and it opened new doors. That's what I'm sort of saying. So yeah, that's my experience.
I like that.
Awesome. Well, that is a great way to wrap this up. Thank you guys again so much for spending the time to share your insights, your knowledge, your experience with us. And I want to thank everyone for watching live, or if you're listening to this in the podcast feed. Take care, guys. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.